I am actually, you're gonna hear.
She's at a stance.
Oh, we're gonna record this one?
Gary's not here. It's your house, it's called the Pintel Invitational. So they're at the actual. Yeah, their last.
I'm on calls with you.
Like, I know I will. But that's where she.
But the article in the paper was very good. I mean, it was very representative.
Turns out the kids are always
I
knowing.
got one general.
Right.
Right.
But it was all, it was good.
I know.
It's over for time. Completely clear. Guy.
I don't know if you.
So it was good meeting. A lot of good questions. Good stuff.
Yeah, but it was.
Yes, I'm nervous. Maybe for the future, though. For the future.
Yeah, but well, unfortunately, it's a real.
It's just kind of a bad one to have.
Yeah. Should have to do a do.
Oh dear, I don't know if I could do that. Not this week.
That's right. Like your season's right. That's very.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's still
Don't
on.
know if it was too.
Tony and Barry.
Oh, no. Is that right?
Perfect.
Tomorrow?
No, our clock.
Jesus.
You don't.
Yeah.
That's right. I think that's what.
Oh, and I forgot to press record on the meeting. Yeah, everyone's gonna be crap, so.
Good at chess.
Say, we're here, like, we're for-
Cool, but I didn't have that.
No, really? Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Wow.
I don't know.
I love yours up here. Wherever.
We'll pick up every single one. Mix things up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the longest.
Spreading my love around. Get off. How are you?
It's like I was always right.
We had,
Yeah.
yeah, and we do have a way to.
We're not gonna try. It's like that.
I fixed that problem.
So they got all of
I fixed that problem. That one I probably.
Yeah.
That one I pressed. Not that
And so, yeah, now it's different, right?
We're not.
Good evening, Michael.
Hey, John.
Oh, I have area. I'm living the dream.
I would be too, but, you know, they're having trouble getting drivers. There we go.
Thank you.
Because
Oh, yeah.
they get fed by money.
Look, wait, just a couple minutes, hopefully very well.
I am not one of them. You're not now. Well, and even then, when you.
Well, here's my
Victor, are we on Zoom? or-
Still gets there.
You sure this is broadcasting and receiving?
Yes.
Right now.
Let's get
We're not
Rob
seated
in.
up here.
That's why.
Right now, we're. Sit up.
We don't need it.
Now. Yeah.
Board lawyers. And
Yeah, we're looking for Mark. Is that one?
yes, six. So you can. Perhaps. We usually do.
Are you lost? I'm like.
We
We get everybody.
Oh, you try. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Very much.
Listen, I got slight accent.
Or should we take Mark off? permanent mute or
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I've just heard the door. Oh,
Yep.
not there.
And what part of the
Okay.
all that statements?
Never played.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just a good answer.
All right, then why don't we get started? This is the meeting of the City of Harbor Springs, Michigan Planning Commission, Thursday, January 18th, 5:30 PM local time. And the meeting's in session. Victor, could you call roll for us?
So I will. Rick Tarshinsky,
Here.
Vanessa Warren,
Here.
Emily Dubay,
Here.
Bob Thoma.
Here.
Tony Johnson,
Here.
Bill Mulder,
Here?
Mark Bidet via Zoom. Barry Westgarten. Here, and Nancy Roundell. Here. Mackenzie, she is not here. So we do have a quorum.
Great. All right, first thing on the agenda is approval of minutes, and we're going way back to November 16th, 2023. Our first set of minutes, and then we've got another set from last couple weeks ago. People have any corrections or additions to the minutes?
I move to approve the November Planning Commission meeting minutes.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Let's talk about those minutes from January 4th, 2 weeks ago. This is where we were, the only thing on the agenda was zoning, and we first looked at the work that the zoning subcommittee had done. And does anybody have any corrections or additions to those minutes?
No, I move to approve the meeting minutes of January 4th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Tony. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, please get the minutes are approved. Great. Next thing on the agenda is public comment or correspondence, and this is the chance for people in the audience to address the planning commission. Tell us good ideas and complaints, suggestions, or anything for the good of the community that's not on tonight's agenda. So let's open it up. There's one.
If you are on Zoom, you can raise your Zoom hand. if you have questions. Comments.
Hey, anyone in the audience have any ideas, suggestions, or comments? All right. Thank you very much. And let's go to new and old business then. And the first thing is the election of our officers. So chair and vice chair for 2024. And to set the stage for this, city council just heard the results of a survey about boards and commissions in Harbor Springs. And I think we all had the chance to fill out that survey, and everybody who's on a board, and it was also just regular residents too, right, Victor?
Yes.
You didn't have to be on a board or anything. And I'll see if I can summarize it. It was a good discussion, and there was quite a variety of opinion on it. And they talked a lot about the pluses and minuses of experience versus new blood, new ideas. And what I took away from it is the conclusion was it's good to have continuity on boards because people can be effective. People don't have to get up to speed and get retrained. And on the other hand, people didn't want people to get stale. And so they didn't want someone to be on a board for too long where they got stale and took it for granted. They didn't want someone to be in a leadership position where they got stale and took it for granted. So they want to see turnover, but not too soon. So council took in that input and decided not to impose any strict guidelines on term limits for boards or for chair positions. And so just to set that stage, the term for our officers for chair and vice chair are 1 year at a time. So we can decide each year who's in the best position to help move us forward. And so that's great. So we'll decide who has time, who has energy, who has, what's needed to be most effective for us. So that's great. And in light of that, I've been chair for 2 years now, and I would be happy to do it again to try to bring the zoning over the finish line. And I'm also super happy to have someone else take leadership. So anything's good with me. And,
We would need a nomination from a board member to nominate someone to be chair, a second, and then we would move on to the vice chair
yeah,
position.
we vote on that person, and if it's a yes, then the person is chair. If it's a no, we come up with another name.
Can I nominate Bill?
You
You're not
could, Mark, but your
Right.
nomination doesn't count because you're via Zoom.
Right, understood. I nominate Bill.
We're doing that now.
Yes, it's time to do that now, yes, so.
Here.
Bob,
Yeah, I nominate you again. It would be foolish to switch horses now.
I'll second that.
Middle of a pretty big move.
So we got Bob made a motion, and who seconded that?
I did.
Vanessa, Emily?
do we have any discussion on that? Now's the time, tell them your idea.
I think it's a wise choice considering what planning commission for a lot, because I think Bill's a great chair, but because of what we're doing right at this moment, to switch chairs right now would be really slow things down. So as long as he's willing to continue to spend the huge number of hours it takes to do this, I think that's a wise choice.
Yep, I want to get this thing done, and I love working with you all, so. All right, we have a motion on the table and a second. Victor, do you want to call roll?
Yes, Rick Tarczynski,
Yes,
Emily Dubay,
Yes.
Bob Toma,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Tony Johnson,
Yes.
and Bill Mulder.
Yes. Okay,
We have all.
thank you for your votes, and we would love to bring this thing over the finish line with you. Thank you. And how about a vice
You're not
chair?
going anywhere, even after the finish line. We've got books on you.
Yes. Our vice chair is Mark, and what do people think about vice chair? Anyone interested in?
Well,
serving
let
that?
me say, can I say this first, please?
Yeah.
It's been wonderful being the vice chair, but I just picked up another project in Montana. And I mean, I'm gonna be there as much as I possibly can. I'm also, to be quite honest, I will be working out of state, periodically. And so I'm not sure I'd love to do it, but I'm not sure I'm the best one, just because I can't commit to being there 95% of the time. So I just want to be really straight about that. And if somebody else wants to step in, I'm really happy to relinquish it. As long as we got Bill in the front, that's all that matters to me.
No.
Thanks, Mark.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I do.
All right, so
So,
Is there somebody?
no, it's not my call. So anybody have any other thoughts? Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Rick.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
yes, my time is pretty tight with work, but I think I could
You'll
do
be fine.
it. I've only had to miss one meeting, so.
Yeah. You'll be fine.
Is there a second on that, or is there, well, I guess we wouldn't talk about other options at this point.
we need a second.
I would be happy to second that motion.
Any discussion? Okay, we have a nomination and a second for Rick Tarczynski to serve as vice chair.
Roll call. Okay. Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Tony Johnson,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Emily Dubay,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
Yes.
and Rick Tarczynski.
Yes,
All right, so Bill is the new chair and Rick, well, same, Bill is the chair and Rick is the new vice chair.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is to review our schedule of meetings, and our schedule has us meeting on the third Thursday of every month at 5:30 p.m. here. How do people feel about that schedule? Still good?
Normally, I'm fine.
Looks good to me.
All right, why don't we then,
We can do a motion to accept the schedule and then I can do it all, second, I can do it all in favor.
Okay, good. I'll make a motion to accept the schedule as proposed here in the package.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion.
Okay. Then, Victor, about our bylaws, are there some key points that we should be reminded of?
Yeah, I will go over just some basic key points of our bylaws as well as just general meeting quorum and rules. So I think one good thing to highlight is to keep in mind as a planning commission, the purpose. And so the purpose of the planning commission, I'll read here, is shall be to preserve the character of the city of Harbor Springs and to plan, guide, and promote the efficient, coordinated development of the city in a manner which will best promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of its people. So that's the purpose of the planning commission. Of course, we have the two big duties, well, three big duties for the planning commission. One is to review site plans and special land uses that come before you. So to act in that legislative capacity to approve applications that come before you. So that's one of your legislative. Well, that's more of a kind of like a judicial, sorry. Then you got the legislative aspect, which is creating the master plan and the zoning code. So that's where you guys are actually getting down the weeds and writing law, quote unquote, that council will eventually approve. So those are master plan, zoning code, and approving or reviewing applications that come before you are the three big duties. Of course, you're always act advisory to the city council on any topic that they'd like to seek input on. As of course, you're also giving some input on capital improvement projects, especially how our capital improvement projects align with master plan goals. So those are the main duties of the planning commission. Of course, the planning commission is composed of 9 members. One is and these 9 members are appointed by the mayor and approved by council. We have 1 council person serving on the planning commission, and we are allowed to have up to 2 people who are not city residents. And that's according to state law to be on the planning commission. I think at this point, everyone is a city resident, I believe, or is not. Well, except for Mark. Yes, Mark is not. And we're also allowed to have 1 person who serves on both the ZBA and the planning commission, and Bob is that individual in this case. So that's a little bit about the composition. And of course, I went through those main goals, as you see, advisory boards of the city, master plan, et cetera. Want to emphasize, and this is kind of what Mark was getting at a little bit, but we do encourage attendance, strict attendance at these meetings, of course, but there is flexibility there. Of course, there's work obligations, family obligations, which always are most important to everyone, your family and your jobs. But we generally try to make 2/3 of the meetings, as it's in our bylaws, that if you miss more than 1/3, that's subject to review by city council. There's a whole process for how removing a member if they have too many absences. We haven't really had to use that yet, but it's always on the table if you guys suspect that someone is not, doing their duty as a planning commissioner. And there's always an ability to point to this reference. Usually people who can't commit to attending meetings, they usually voluntarily, will leave. They're like, hey, listen, I can't attend anymore. So usually we don't run into that problem, but there is a process for that. Officers, we just appointed, there's a chair, the vice chair. Jeff Grimm, as the zoning administrator, acts as a secretary, so he does the minutes and secretarial duties for the board. Our meeting procedures generally are pretty consistent with all the other boards. Our bylaws are pretty consistent there about how to run a meeting, but according and to the Open Meetings Act, which is the Michigan law on making the public knowledgeable about what's going on at a meeting and available to comment and participate in the meeting. So the open meetings law was something that was codified probably sometime in the 1970s to make government more transparent. So we've incorporated a lot of the open meetings obligations and rules and requirements into our bylaws as succinctly as possible. But of course, the basic ones are, you have a quorum to run a meeting, and a quorum needs to vote on a matter. So let's say you have 6 people, that's a quorum, but normally have 9 people. So if the vote is 4-2, that motion fails because you need a quorum of the majority of the whole board for a motion to pass. So that's something always to keep in mind, and that usually happens during special land uses where we need 6 people to hear a special land use, in that case, all 6 would need to vote yes in order for that special land use to be approved, because you need a quorum of that number. Sorry, you need a quorum of, yeah, sorry. I think that's correct, right?
It is 6.
Special land use.
For special land use, yeah.
6, you need 6. You need 6 to write it.
We talked
and-
about that.
Yeah.
Last year, we decided to leave it as.
Leave it
is.
at 6, yeah.
Things that come to,
That's right, we did.
to special land use.
That was important enough.
So if there's not a quorum, then it's not technically a public meeting and no decisions can be made. So if there's no quorum available, so if there's only 4 people at a meeting. Something to also keep in mind is that for planning commission members' discussions outside a planning commission meeting, you should not be deliberating or discussing topics when there's when there's a quorum of you at the table. So let's say you guys are all out and run into each other at Bar Harbor, Pearson's, or wherever, New York, and guess to start talking about planning commission. There's 6 of you there, 5 of you there. Stay away from conversations about planning commission issues. That's just a state law. Same thing comes with emails. We try to be pretty strict about that. Is if you're on an email chain with other planning commission members, just remember how many people are on that email chain and try to stick to all your main topics of discussion at a public meeting. Of course, you can talk one-on-one with other planning commission members about, ideas you have and stuff like that, but keep the deliberations to under a quorum for the state law. And we do have provisions of conflict of interest that I should emphasize, and I think most people are pretty good about this, but conflict of interest is usually when you have some sort of financial interest in a matter, or you have some sort of, let's say, for example, Bill came to the planning commission to get, something approved on his property. Of course, he shouldn't vote on it. Or if one of his family members came to the board to get something approved, he shouldn't be voting on that. The conflict of interest, though, does not mean, you can't vote on an ordinance that may or may not affect your property sometime in the future. It's really about a specific financial or other, proximate interest that you have on a particular issue. So just keep that in mind. It's generally a financial interest, but it also, in this case, planning commission is probably gonna be a property interest when it comes to your properties.
And last year, Victor reminded us a couple times that we had concerns or questions about whether or not a person should vote on something, that really the default is to vote and deliberate and to participate. It's not to stand back and let the rest of your committee members make a tough decision. And, but the right thing to do is to raise any concerns, and then we all decide. If it sounds like there's a conflict, then that person gets excused. If there's not, then the person could either deliberate or deliberate and vote.
You cannot just declare you have a conflict just to avoid voting on something, right? That doesn't happen often, but sometimes people are like, I don't. Your abstention from a vote will count as a no vote. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you abstain from a vote, it counts as a no vote unless it's a conflict of interest. Then you abstain from a vote, it doesn't count. Then you're only taking the 8 people who vote as part of the overall tally. Another thing to mention, and this is more important for the council member, but or the ZBA member, if you're voting on the same particular issue, let's say the issue comes before the planning commission, the same issue comes before the ZBA, you only can vote on that particular issue on one board. Same thing with a council member. Let's say there's an interest issue that comes before the planning commission, and the same issue comes before the city council. That member has to decide at which board they want to vote on. So they can either abstain from the planning commission or they can abstain from the city council, but they can't vote on both. That is the general gist. I would also just keep, even though it's not quite on here, of course, we've gone through parliamentary procedure, motions. Bill's pretty good at, you need to make a motion in a second and have a vote. A FOIA requirements, it's not in our bylaws, but just remember that all your emails are as a city commissioner, or as the planning commissioner for the city, your emails related to the planning commission activity are subject to FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests. So let's say we do get in a lawsuit. Let's say, for example, someone appeals planning commission decision to the ZBA, and that ZBA decision goes all the way to circuit court. They can do a FOIA of our email conversations about this particular topic. So just keep that in mind, that your emails and other communications are subject to FOIA. That doesn't happen often, But it has happened, for example, in the Irish boat shop case back in 2018, 2019. So let's keep that in mind. So that's just to guide you in how you communicate with other people and what you talk about in those emails.
Victor, did we make the correction to the bylaws to bring that one about city council appointing and the mayor appointing?
No, I didn't make the correction. That is something that we do need to make. Nancy had pointed out that, so state statute and our city code says the mayor makes appointment and council approves. I think our bylaws say that the council makes appointment. So we just need to make that clear that it's the mayor who makes the appointment. Our bylaws. So I can, after we discuss these, I think we can make a motion. If there's that change or any other changes that you may want to see in the bylaws, and we can bring that to council, probably just a consent agenda thing. If it's just a minor change, like the mayor makes appointments. Any questions about the bylaws, Open Meetings Act, voting, your salaries?
Yeah. Salary is the same as it was last year.
And with interest.
Zero.
Victor, there hasn't been a raise for 25 years.
So Nancy and Victor, are you saying that change in some wording is needed in our
Under
bylaws?
the comp, right at
Yes.
the top there.
Article 3, Section 1 says the members of the planning commission shall consist of 9 persons appointed by the city council. It should say appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. So that was a change we would recommend.
Yeah, that's the same.
Make that change. It's, I know it seems minor, but the difference at the city council level is that if it's a mayor appointment, only the mayor can officially make a motion to appoint someone. But the whole council has to approve it. If it's a city council appointment, anyone in the city council can make a nomination to appoint someone to be on the board. So it's a minor distinction, but it does have relevancies. We would recommend making that change.
And that's in the city council stuff.
That's in the city code.
City
It's
code.
also in the Michigan Plan Enabling Act. It's also in the language of the state law, so.
Okay.
Do you need a motion from us then to amend these bylaws for the planning commission?
Yeah, we would need a motion and second, make a recommendation to council. to approve that.
Okay. I'll make that motion to make a recommendation to council to update this wording to clarify the how members of the planning commission are appointed.
Second.
Vanessa, second. Think we can do it all in favor of this one. It's gonna be fine.
I probably shouldn't vote on this.
Oh, because you're gonna vote on it in council. vote. All right, so Nancy Landau abstains. A good example of who we're just talking about.
All right, all in favor of making this an amendment to the planning commission bylaws, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None opposed.
Passes.
Okay. Any other?
I think, wait,
First, Victor?
wait,
Yes.
sorry, let me double check. We do have a thing in our bylaws that says changes to the bylaws might require a certain amount. These bylaws may be amended on an affirmative vote of at least 6 members. Yep, 6. 6, all right. Again,
Just got it.
bylaws matter.
I don't know whether it matters, but in that same first section, right in the middle of the paragraph, it does reference the fire advisory board. Do we?
You know, that's a good point, and that would require probably a change to the city code, because it's also written like that in the city code. When we had a fire advisory board.
So it doesn't exist anymore?
No, because we have a fire department that's run by a fire authority now. So what we can do is maybe amend it and ask council to make a motion, but I think I probably should go to council and, well, you know what, we could amend it here. And,
Yeah.
and then,
Tony,
So do we
would you
want
care
to
to-
I just want to remove it.
take it out?
Yeah.
well,
Or I'm asking. What I obviously.
technically,
Put in there
technically it's
first.
in the city code. Technically, it's in the city code, so that technically should.
Does it also say that in the city?
It
code?
does, yeah, because when we created the planning commission, we had per statute, we had a fire advisory board.
And that has to go to the people.
No,
The
no,
code?
no, the code is just a council.
Council.
Okay.
Change the charter is a,
Charter.
it goes to-
Okay. Because
Tony, would you like to propose which words to strike there specifically?
Yeah, it would simply be the fire advisory board, 5 words.
eliminate, eliminate the fire advisory. I think what we can do is just ask Bill to make an amendment to his motion. And
Oh, that would be efficient. Yeah, I'd like to amend my last motion to also strike the 5 words or the fire advisory board in section 1.
And then the second was Vanessa. Okay, and then all in favor, with Nancy abstaining.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that would be also, I would recommend the council to change the code, but that's something that's minor.
Let's just make sure everyone's in favor of the amended motion. All in favor of the amended motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
Also, I go off the fire department.
Mhm.
I do that by all three.
Okay, Victor, are we good?
Put my name down.
Good on that track, didn't you? All right.
Thank you.
Last thing on the planning commission agenda tonight is member comments. Are there any other comments, ideas, issues you'd like to raise before we terminate this meeting? And start another one. All right, this meeting's adjourned.
All right, I can wait 2 minutes.
Yeah, you want to stop the recording and make them into two recordings or? Oh, ZBA friends, come on up here. Let's get you around the table.
Let's get you some chairs.
Bring your chair.
a little bit. You might not need all of them.
You can sit, I mean, Michael, you can come sit over there. Not, that's not big enough.
How many here?
You could be on the corner. I need to be here. It's okay. It's fine.
Bluebirds and stuff coming out of all
Sir?
these.
How are you? I'm doing good. Thank you.
I think you're.
Yeah, she started,
Right.
job over the- Yeah, she's, getting trained.
The guy who's.
Actually on her way, actually, just got to St. John. It's, parents there before they get a meeting tomorrow in person. I did about Zoom all weekend, tomorrow's in person.
Bob, would you like to run this part?
We can.
All right.
So is this what we're calling an actual ZBA meeting?
It's a joint
A
ZBA.
joint ZBA meeting, okay. All right, would you call the roll, the ZBA, please?
Yes, I can. Kim Morris,
Yeah, here.
Michael Behrman,
Here.
Sue Stewart,
Here.
John Leo,
Here.
Bob Thelma,
Here.
Mary Hines is not here,
Would you also call
and
the,
Bob Buckner.
yeah, would you also call the
The other guy.
the other guys?
Rick Tarczynski. Yeah. So Warren here, Emily Dubay,
Here.
Bob Thelma,
Here.
Tony Johnson,
Here,
Bill Mulder,
Here.
Mark Boudet. Barry Lustgarten, not here, Nancy Rondell,
Here.
and Mackenzie Bowman is not here. We do have a forum for both boards.
Now we'll jump back to ZBA. Approval of minutes. ZBAers.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Which minutes are those?
Yeah.
From
The ZBA minutes.
January. What, last Wednesday.
Were those distributed to you guys?
They out yet?
Are they?
Yeah, January 10th.
In the packet?
I don't have, no, wait, I don't think.
I don't think so. It's a special meeting,
That was
right?
our last,
Get into me,
that
right?
was our last meeting.
Yeah, for special meetings, we don't usually don't put. That's, sorry, I don't, Jeff just left that on the agenda.
Okay, good.
No, no big deal. So no minutes to approve.
No minute, okay. How about public comment and correspondence? We have any correspondence and anybody from the public like to speak? Besides something about boats? Okay, so much for that. We're here tonight to do a joint meeting between ZBA and the Planning Commission. Planning Commission's been working overtime, some of these folks, to change the zoning districts and regulations in this small city. And I'm gonna let Bill, who's the head of the Planning Commission, explain it to it because it's way over my head.
It's not.
It's not.
Anyway, great. Thank you, ZBA partners, for being with us tonight. We've been thinking about you throughout this whole process, trying to head off common requests that you get and think through ways that we could be more efficient, more responsive to our residents. And we know that when something isn't popular or something doesn't work right, you guys end up with it, and we appreciate it. So that's what that's all about. I want to make sure that you all know John Ico Angeli. You may not know, he's our contract planner from Beckett and Rader, the professional planning firm. And John's been the guiding force for a lot of this, a lot of our work and sharing best practices from other municipalities, and we've learned a ton. And he's been just turning around a ton of work in really record time. So hats off to John, and I'm glad you're going to get to work with him too. All right, at our last planning commission meeting, commissioner, we gave a kind of a PowerPoint overview of the recommendations for zoning updates, and you asked for another level of detail. And so we have been looking forward to providing that next level of detail so that we can get more specific. And this is kind of an intermediate level. This is a table of the proposed changes. Last time we saw a PowerPoint presentation about them. Now we're getting more specific, and then shortly you're actually going to get the wording from the proposed zoning ordinance, about the first 100 pages or something like that. And so then we can really dive into it. And then after we talk about the recommended changes, then we can talk about our timeline and next steps, if that's all right. Sound good? Okay.
Bill, question, do you want us to pass these out yet or?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we need it. John, what do you?
No, I think go through your.
Okay, yeah, let's go through this.
Okay. Do you want to go through the presentation first or the table?
I think the table, yeah. We're going to do the presentation. ZBA partners, you got a copy of the presentation in the mail. That sets the stage for why we're doing this whole thing. And I'm going to just mention a couple things because people may be watching this after it's been recorded. And the key aspects about why we are doing this is because we updated the city master plan per the law. And now the zoning code follows from that and has to jive and sync with the master plan. So that's the main reason. The other two key findings that we have is about our demographics in the city of Harbor Springs and our little 1.25 square patch here. Our residents are significantly older than the surrounding areas and significantly older than the state. We also have a very high number of single person households that goes in the 40s, mid 40%. And that's significantly higher than the surrounding area and the state as well. So we're looking ahead and being proactive about what our residents are likely going to need and want to make their lives wonderful going forward. Housing is a big part of that. And so we are called Planning Commission. We want to get out ahead and try to do something proactive. So there, in a nutshell, the underpinnings of this whole thing. All right, are you ready to dig in? Okay, here we go. Number one item, or these are really key topics. And the first one is the format and structure of the zoning code. And we restructured the whole thing, modernized it, removed requirements that were redundant with the building codes and synced with our nearby townships and the county where applicable. And we think it's more readable, more usable, and is much more modern. And jump in on any of these with questions or ideas. Yes.
What's an example of what you mean by syncing with nearby townships and counties? Is that in terms of the labels that you use for districts, or what does it reference?
Yeah, John, can you give me an example?
Only example is the square footage for dwellings.
Yeah, minimum square footage per dwelling. Our one that we had didn't match with the counties. And just for background, the county runs zoning for 3 of our sister townships, and there are another 3 that have their own zone. And so the county has done a ton of work, and county also runs it for a bunch of other townships, but not continuous with us. And we have our own zoning code, but it makes sense because many of the professionals work across boundaries, and so where it made sense, we took it. Where it didn't make sense, we did our own thing.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so this would be probably one of the top, the next one is one of the top 5 topics for this project, and that's combining 17 existing zoning districts into 9 new districts. And Victor, do we have math?
Yeah, that's what I was going. Yes.
Existing.
Let's see.
No, it's 17 points.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, you should do that.
Yeah.
This is. Yeah, this is the way this is. Yeah.
Hey, Victor, give one for the audience.
It's a new one.
Oh, yeah. for the-
I already have.
Yeah, Mark. Thank you.
Do you want to do it?
I already have.
You get one for the- Yeah.
Put that back.
Oh, I did it backwards. Sorry.
Yeah, you hand it out for post.
This is a test.
We're just making, you're just making sure. we're
Thank
paying
you.
attention.
I didn't look at it, so I apologize.
All right, so our existing zoning map is the one that is more of a patchwork, has more colors and more districts. And, we've learned that those zoning districts grew up for good reasons at the time, but now it looks like there's an opportunity to condense and simplify and make it easier for residents to understand and easier for city staff to administer. Since residential districts make up the vast majority of our square area, of our 1.25 square miles, then that's where a lot of the opportunity came in, and then also in business districts. So, John, what else should everybody know about combining districts?
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about, this was one of the initial stages of the plan or the zoning process, was that there was an effort to or to enlarge the CBD to include the B1 districts and the B2 districts that are in proximity along 3rd Street as part of the central business district. The issue between the R1A, R1B, R1C, which constitutes the 3 single family, districts is nothing more than lot size. So the group decided to standardize a minimum lot size and not be so concerned with trying to manage the lots depending on, some of the plats. So we created a minimum lot size based on the smallest lot size in one of the plats here in the community as the minimum. And then that allowed us then to collapse the other three residential districts into one, which became the RN district. The other residential district that we looked at, you have a lot of R1A that's along the waterfront. And that was, we determined that those properties that abut the waterfront are a little bit larger lots, a little bit longer, have a little bit different dimensional requirements. So we standardized those as residential waterfront. So we have residential neighborhood and residential waterfront, which takes up pretty much all of the residential space in the city, which allowed us to collapse a number of the districts down. So that's where a lot of the districts got folded into, is the residential category.
And then there's also simplification of the business districts, where the only business district below the bluff is the CBD. And the only business district above the bluff is our
B1.
convenience business, which we call B1 Pink. That would include IGA and Fairview Plaza and along Lake Street there.
Bill and John, is this the time for some recommendation or no? You would rather just go through and get ZBAs?
No, let's talk about each of the topics individually, yes.
Okay, so one question, I brought this up with Jeff, and I don't know if it got to John, but I think one question maybe the planning commission should consider is whether or not some of the city-owned property on the waterfront should remain as part of the waterfront district or should be classified as a community for zoning purposes. For example, the Marina building right now currently is under the waterfront district, but it is a community property. So it's just something to keep in mind. We have a few parcels throughout town. There's also one on Pepper Street where we have our Pepper Street well that's shown as a residential. You may want to keep that as residential for future use, but I don't see how that well is ever going to be anything for a long time. So just something to think about. We should probably go through our maps and look at where all the city-owned property is and whether or not we want to classify that city.
That's the key.
Yeah,
If you want to keep it commercial or community.
Yes,
zone it
exactly.
Community, and if you think it's gonna be
a residential.
residential or redeveloped and classified accordingly.
Yeah, so and the one thing, and just for you, John, the Bluff Park right here, these two parcels.
Yeah.
Are technically, we determined they're no longer city-owned. They're residential. No, they're residential, so just make that change. But anyway, that was something in general I just wanted to throw out because you may want to keep the Marina Park as a waterfront property, but you may want to classify it as a community property.
Doesn't it make sense to be consistent with the city property to have it all classified the same way?
So it's very interesting because I think that's where I was coming at it with, but in the rare chance the city property is sold or used for something else, do you want that property to be used for a community purpose, or do you want it to be used for a waterfront or a residential? And that's up to the planning commission. My feeling was it should be as community because it's community owned, but the future use, we may have some city properties in residential neighborhoods like the Pepper Street well, that maybe you don't want to see something like a recreational facility on. So if we ever sold that property, you would want it maybe to see as a residential home there. So that's something to think about, but.
But the zoning could be changed at that. point.
Yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, my mind went to if it's going to be sold and used for something else, rezone it at that point. But today, it's community, so why not identify it?
And be consistent.
Great.
Because I pointed out to Bill that, I live around the corner from the well.
Yeah.
And it looks residential, and the question was, well, why?
Mhm.
And it may be historic or whatever, but I think if cleaning up the map,
Yeah.
it should all be consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So John, I would recommend maybe if
I'll get what
you get with Jeff to see what parcels are actually city owned and bring up a revised map to the planning commission, and then you guys can decide about. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Victor. And John, for spotting that. Any questions on that topic? All right, now, we did get a letter from a resident about the elimination of the AR agricultural district. And he raised some great questions.
Chickens.
I think that context was orchard. No, Mr. Heston? Mr. Scott
Scott
Heston?
Heston.
It was at the end of this table in the package. And so he raised the concern about the fact that the use that he's planning on for orchards could require special approval by planning commission. And he didn't think that was fair and wanted to weigh in to say that maybe we don't collapse the agricultural district. And so that's a key topic that I'd love to get some input on tonight from this group. John, can you tell us the countervailing?
Can he engage in agricultural
Yeah,
activity in?
The current zoning map for the properties that are north of Bluff and to the west is Peffer.
Yes.
Those are classified now as AR. In the master plan, which was adopted, those same properties are listed as low density residential. And there's very little, I went through the master plan quickly this afternoon. There's very little mention about agricultural property. And it's not even, doesn't even show up in the future land use key. But the issue is, if anybody in this area currently has a agricultural zone property and they're using the property for orchard or a vineyard or some form of agricultural that's currently allowed under the zoning code, they'd still be able to use it even when the ordinance goes into effect. So I don't think it's an issue. It's not that he's gonna have to come back before the planning commission and ask for special approval for doing something that he's already doing because it's already a matter of record. The other part is, I think, from a planning point of view, and this is in the master plan, is that the plan recognizes the fact that the 1.25 square miles of the city is virtually landlocked physically, both from the townships and the lake, and there's no other room to grow. And the available property that was identified in the master plan were some of the agricultural properties. They have large lots, both along where I mentioned Bluff and Pepper, and then along the Harbor Street and north of East Lake. So from a planning perspective, the master plan really focuses on trying to develop properties for more housing for year-round residents. And the fact that the city already has infrastructure, water and sewer, makes those properties much more readily available for redevelopment in the future. So from a planning perspective, it's appropriate that the new zoning ordinance reflect what's in the master plan in terms of providing the opportunity for these areas to develop as lower density residential developments. So it should not have an implication on what's currently going on there. Many of these properties that are currently zoned ag are basically large lots with a residence on them. So it's fairly consistent already.
So if an individual who owns an AR property right now is not doing some sort of agricultural use on his property, but in the future wants to, and we adopt a new code, then he'll have to come
For a special
for a
approval.
special approval. Special.
Yeah.
But if it's just planting some fruit trees on their property, they can do that
can do that.
regardless. It would be if they wanted,
Your
to use it.
agricultural provisions in your ordinance are pretty limiting
yeah,
because you don't allow livestock.
yeah.
So it's really just orchards, if they wanted to plant grapes, they could do that.
Grapes.
So I
They
guess
can do that.
maybe the key question is, and I see where Nancy's going is, what would we define as having to come for a special use? Like, so you have two fruit trees, or do you have 60 fruit trees in
I
your
wouldn't think
backyard?
any, unless they're selling the
Well, yes,
product
exactly.
correctly, but
Yeah, the only difference would be is if they planted tomatoes and they sold them at a farmer's market, then technically that's a farm. But if somebody has a large lot and they want to plant fruit trees or they want to plant vines, you could do that in a residential district too.
You
So I
have a
think-
garden.
Or a garden, yeah.
One of the things in AR right now, I believe, is truck farming. Am I right?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Truck farming. So I could see where that would trip things
Well,
over
gardens.
because that's very different than planting pear trees in your yard or apple trees. And I don't even know if you sold them at the farmer's market. I legally don't know what that would be. People grow things at their own homes and sell them. So I won't think it would have a particularly big impact on the people that want to do any of that, grow their own food or anything like that.
Well, the parcels that you currently have, you can see them on the map, are relatively, from an agricultural point of view, very small.
They're tiny.
I mean, they're small. They're really what these would be classified. If this was a township, these would be classified rural residential lots, which are greater than an acre. They wouldn't even, in a township, they would not even be classified as agricultural property.
So we're really not taking anything away
No.
and we're adding the potential
Or,
to increase
yes,
the density and maybe their profit from their land if they chose to do that.
yes,
with it.
yes.
But there was no real answer to, given that we're saying you have to come for a special land, what
You
would
would-
trigger that? We're eliminating that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
wanted
the
to.
garden he's strongly for sale now again. And whoever winds up buying that property inevitably is never gonna grow tomatoes on it. They're gonna put a circle in and build 12 mega houses and call it a day. Why, what farmer could afford it?
You have a member of the audience whose house I think is in the AR district. Is that right, Ken?
There.
That's right.
Do you have any concerns or have you
Uh,
thought about this?
yeah, two or three. When is the appropriate time for public comment on?
Why don't we allow that right now?
Whenever
since
Beth
we're on the
does
topic?
this, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yes, my name is Kenny Stewart and I live on, Sayan Drive, which is not a city road. And it is west of Pepper. And on the new, map, you can see a little section there that's got what looks like a court and a few, pieces of property. So that's where I live. So just a caution for the, because you're working through these things. First of all, if Bluff Gardens is gonna be sold, I can see why the master plan would be anticipating that it would become residential. But in the spirit of consistency, if it is right now agricultural, think about what you want to designate that property. So that's just one comment. The next comment is, the AR green section is the largest new land grab Harbor Springs has ever had in decades, right? And I'm concerned about a couple of unintended consequences once that and the current Bluff Gardens property does become residential. You talked about minimum lot size, which certainly makes sense for you to have that as a planning. But picture the size of the AR with minimum lots. What will happen to population density in that area? And is that something that you want to allow happen? Or should you now consider some density restrictions to that area? So that's another concern. The other concern is that Harbor Point is a private association. I'm concerned about potential gamesmanship in the future. If someone purchases the entire AR, then they could put in whatever housing would be permissible by these groups. And then they could create a private club, society, association, and then farm out partial ownerships. And pretty soon they could get into the business of Airbnb-ing under the radar of the city. I don't know if you have sufficient provisions elsewhere to protect from those unintended consequences. But I think it's important to do that before you get to the point of deciding to convert the AR over to a residential business. And finally, the other thing is a cleanup matter, and I'm living it right now. Technically, I live in a Lake Street Association. This was created before I moved to the property, but somehow they were able to magically create a street, 5 lots, 4 houses, all within what is now designated an AR. And so if that occurred back in 2004, I'm concerned about some new gamesmanship that could occur in the new AR property once this big, huge area becomes residential. So does that all make sense? And I'm happy to answer your questions, and also very happy to put this in writing for you to consider over the coming weeks.
Yeah, that would be great. You could do that, Ken.
Okay, to put your mind at rest about the Airbnbs and stuff, it's now part of our residential district. And there are a limited number of short-term rentals that can be in that area.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be an explosion there because all our licenses are sold currently. And there's probably a 1.5 year waiting list to get on it, so.
Yes, I appreciate that, and I do understand that, but I'm wondering if there would be a way, and this is purely speculation, for them to create some sort of private club that would allow them to get under the radar and make something. So if you have enough protection for that citywide, then that takes care of it.
Citywide, there's only a limited number of short-term rentals.
It would take,
And
it would
each
take a
one-
drive to purchase them.
Each piece of property has to have its own license.
Okay,
So it's pretty much protected from that worry.
Well, thank you very much for coming tonight, Kenny, and for thinking this through. And I'd love to see
Yeah.
your thoughts in writing so we can.
sure, and I didn't anticipate talking at all this evening, so thanks for asking.
Great job. Okay. People around this table.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, Bob.
Okay, so people from the ZBA, who this is all kind of new to, what are your thoughts on this? Okay, not okay, move forward, not move forward?
We're moving forward very slowly. And we're taking very good, careful look
Well, I
at
mean, I
it.
want to know what the people from the ZBA are thinking about this to tell us.
Yeah.
That we're doing what we're doing, but now it's their turn. What are ZBAers thinking about this whole venture? Are we on the right track?
I've tried to keep up with it as the planning commission has had trainings and open houses. I think it's a really good, it's got good momentum and it's addressing a lot of the issues that ZBA has had to deal with.
Okay.
I think the simplification is spot on. And all of the questions that I have are coming out and are being addressed. So I think it's a good.
This is to ease up a cumbersome situation.
Well, and I think it's really important, what
Wait.
you're doing, the code is being updated to sync better. My guess is there'll be a little bit of a back and forth with the master plan. But input to the master plan, yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense, and now both documents are kind of moving forward. Which I don't know the last time edits were made, but I think it's refreshing to see it happening.
So,
Yeah, I like it. I like the simplification. I understand Kenny's comment about the area where he lives, because it looks like now that that is zoned residential neighborhood, someone could buy that large parcel and subdivide it. Could that have happened under AR as well? Okay,
Yes.
so the zoning changes and what puts that at risk? It's,
So I think technically right now, under the PUD provisions, someone could come in and probably put what, 30, 40 lots there. I mean, someone can still do it. It's just gonna be a different mechanism of how they can do it.
I think it's 12 acres, I can't remember.
But that wouldn't circumvent the code.
No.
Could they actually create a private, I mean, the concern being that they could create an entity that would then not be subject to our.
No, they cannot.
I wouldn't think so, no.
Harbor Point got away with that because they did it such a very long time ago, right?
Decades and decades
Yeah.
before zoning, before.
Yeah.
Bob, any,
Well, as the new kid, you know, the 17 different zoning districts seems unwieldy when you think about it. I mean, I'm seeing this not for the first time because Bill shared it with me earlier this year. But it seems to make an awful lot of sense to me, really does. Consolidation seems to make an awful lot of sense.
it's gonna have to make Jeff's job easier. Kim?
I like what I see. I heard your concerns and, I know that, yes, this is addressed elsewhere and there's,
So
it just opens it up for what we want is more homes,
yes.
more potential
Do you think
housing
this is a good
without
idea?
hopefully ruining neighborhoods.
You think this is a good idea?
Bob, what I would suggest, and Bill, is continue going through this table,
Yeah.
because maybe their minds will change after they.
Yeah, and we gotta, figure the right level of detail to go to in this meeting, and we'll keep these in, but this is probably the, in the top 3 or the top 5 issues, so that's great, we nailed it tonight, so.
As long as we're looking at these, just one more question.
Yes.
In the new map, the proposed map, Tourist Park extends, or the blue area extends a lot further than it is on the old. Is that a correction, an update?
Where's that? Which one of the?
Adjacent to Bay Bluffs.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, so that is, and I can get with John to fix that. So we've talked to the state about this. So the original map is, so the current zoning map is the correct city boundaries for that part by Bay Bluffs. We do own that lot. The city owns that parcel that's extended, juts out kind of by Bay Bluffs, past Bay Bluffs.
right.
But it's never been, I want to say, annexed into the city as part of the city, of Harbor Springs. So even though it's
You own it, but it's not a, okay.
same thing with the
Interesting.
pizza, yeah, same
Would
thing.
would ZBA like to, as this progresses,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe another month or so, have Bill come to a ZBA meeting and talk to us again about this and like that, or come to the next meeting?
Maybe by the end of the meeting, there might be.
Yeah, well, when's our next meeting? It's like in
February
have to
14th.
February, okay, how about, he could, so that's almost a month out. Would you want him to come to that meeting to answer some questions that you've been thinking about?
Get back again.
Anyway, sure. Yeah, let's see how we do on this meeting, and we'll figure out our. Okay,
I'm sorry, Michael, what's your thoughts? I'm sorry. I forgot you were down there.
Well,
I apologize.
To the spirit of keeping things moving, well, since you asked, I'd like, and I too have been attending the zoning, workshops that we've had, for the public, and so this is not new to me, but, it's very confusing to have, in the old map, so many different, residential designations. As, for example, as my wife was contemplating a home occupation, it was very, tricky. Are we even in the right zone? What are we? Wait, this is much more simple from a practical standpoint, so thank you.
okay. Sounds like we're,
Keep you, let you know what's going on from our end. Okay, thank you.
so the next 4 things on the page, minimum lot sizes, front setback methodology, side setbacks, minimum floor area, are all kind of enablers of combining the zoning districts. And let's just touch for a minute on lot sizes. We're making our minimum lot size smaller than exists in at least 3 or 4 of the zones today. But that doesn't mean somebody has to build a small house now, or that they're limited to building a small house, because it's still their choice. They can build as big as they want to within the envelope of their property. The city's not telling them to build a smaller house. It's totally up to them. It's about more choice. So same with setbacks. And the front setback methodology actually gives people more choice, because we use an average of the other homes on the block, and to, preserve consistency and a look on the block, and it should be very, very pleasant and non-impactful.
So
So
is addressing something that comes before ZBA, where somebody wants to put a porch on, or somebody wants to make a modification, and it's absolutely consistent with the entire block, but it's not, doesn't mean come.
beautiful. Okay,
No,
I know you guys do hear those all the time.
Yeah.
The way that we've got it set up is that front yard setback is the average of the block, the side yard setbacks are 12% of the lot width, but at least 8 feet. And we allow, if it's not an enclosed porch, we allow the porch to encroach into the front yard by 7 feet.
That is great, and it's consistent with, I think, the master plan and creating neighborhoods where people are out and talking with each other, and I think it's great.
Great. Okay, moving on to the top of page 2. So this is one of the other top 5 probably topics, and these are additional housing types. And we thought long and hard about how we could help the zoning code, number 1, jive with the master plan, and number 2, give people more options about how they configure their properties. And as a result of that, we're recommending that in RN, people could use single dwellings as they can today. And they would also have an option for a duplex, triplex, and an ADU, accessory dwelling unit. And exactly the same thing in waterfront. And also similar in residential multiple. So this is a new concept for Harbor Springs, and number of communities around the world, the country, are enacting some different approaches to perhaps create some more affordable housing opportunities in their communities. And accessory dwelling units are a big thing. It's a separate, standalone, smallish housing unit that a homeowner can build on their property. And they can use it for family members. They could live in it themselves. They could use it as their family makeup changes, and it'll help them adjust to it. What we're saying, though, is there's one thing they can't do, and that's just short-term rental.
But they can long-term.
They can long-term,
They help.
which we think would be a benefit for the community, because we do need more modest rentals.
Exactly.
Bill and John, I have a clarifying question. Under waterfront district, is that the residential waterfront or is it the actual water?
Oh,
That should be res.
it's RW.
It's like
It's me and 2 cats.
And so there are some renderings behind Victor's right ear on a couple accessory dwelling units.
Now, the requirements for an accessory dwelling unit as far as how large it can be is still relative to the size of the property, relative to the footprint of the existing.
Relative to the first floor footprint.
Of the primary structure.
Okay, that doesn't change it. Okay.
Unless the primary is very small,
Then we have a minimum.
then we have, we have a minimum.
That's on page 4 of the table.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's in there. It's from built very
Right,
small.
well, because there's so much variability. Okay.
It's the second row.
ADU, yeah.
And we're saying modify our guest quarters regulations that exist today to allow the occupancy of a small detached accessory structure usable by family or friends, and we set a 560 square foot minimum, and the max would be 75% of the principal building's footprint.
Now, the current code, I believe, limits all accessory buildings, whether it's a storage unit or a dwelling unit. The total square footage is 75%, that remains.
That's still in there. Can I say something about multiple residential?
Yes.
Which is something different that that it makes it more difficult to build a single family home in a multiple residential now, the way we've written, the way we were proposing it. To try and encourage multiple residential in multiple residential. We don't have much of that, but down the road, maybe more. So I think that's kind of an important difference from what our outlook has been up to this point. You know, some of our multiple residential have single family homes in it, right?
And you could still do that, but only by right. You're only by
A
permit.
special land, what is it?
Special land use.
Special
land
land
use.
use. Yeah, so it's a possibility.
Where it used to be by right.
It used to be by
Well,
right,
we're
Yeah.
trying to encourage a certain behavior, and that's
Yeah.
consistent.
and that helps to do that.
And then talk about duplexes and triplexes. And that's something that we do not allow by right today. And we're recommending that we should, because it's an efficient way to potentially build some more modest sized housing, and it's a way for a resident to perhaps earn some income by renting out half of her property, if that makes sense, or having a family member live there as well. And we're saying that those can be long-term rented and they can be short-term rented. So, but if they fall into the same regulations that the rest of the city has, they'd have to qualify for a license and meet all the regs in order to do that.
And they're still governed by the same sort of setback requirements,
Mhm.
regardless of whether it's a single family unit or a tri.
Greatest point, Bob. That's exactly right. If you want to build a home that has two front doors instead of one, it has to fit into the same box, same envelope, same setback. And
You say could be short-term rented, but it's subject to the same limited number of licenses that are
Right.
available. Okay,
And a duplex would have to have two if you were
Yeah,
gonna rent.
but just to clarify,
For
we're not
residents.
increasing the number of licenses, and that's not being proposed. It would be under the same umbrella.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, so that's, I say, these are probably another couple of the major top 5 teams that we recommend. And residents may be concerned about duplexes and triplexes. And I had a friend, neighbor who saw a preview of this back when we previewed it, and he was concerned that really what the planning commission was trying to do was to entice poor people to move into duplexes in Harbor Springs. And we can't say who buys a home, who rents a home. We're just trying to give people more options about how they use their property. And if somebody has an option to earn some extra money and it doesn't trouble the neighbors, then it should be great.
And I think one thing that, Bill, you led with earlier in this meeting was that, you pointed to our demographics, and it's the aging population that maybe want to reduce their household size, or maybe you want to have, a neighbor right next to them, to check up on them. I think that's also part of driving this conversation of housing types. So we've talked about young families, we talked about, year-round residents, but we also talked about our existing residents who might want to downsize from a big house to a smaller, so.
Yeah, great point, Victor.
Again, everything that is being proposed will have no immediate overnight, next week effect. It will be incorporated into the mindset of people that want to build or remodel going forward.
And then I wanted to prep everybody with a statistic that could be helpful. When people express concerns about having duplex or triplex ability in their neighborhood, and that is the fact that we used to have 300 more full-time residents than we do today in the city of Harbor Springs.
Yeah.
And that was only 24 years ago during the census of 2000. So if people say it's going to increase traffic and too many people, that is not correct, because our household size continues to drop average. So anyway, we have room and it shouldn't be uncomfortable. All right. Thanks. You can go over a lot of the stuff. The next 2 things are about our business districts, which we think we've simplified and done a pretty good job on. Regulated uses. This is one where the devil's in the details, and the planning commission took a couple live joint efforts at clarifying the number of uses in our big table for business and for residential in each district. We think we have modernized and simplified those. You can check it out when you get your copies. So in ZBA partners, you could really scrub that, help us scrub that. It would be tremendous. We're introducing a floodplain overlay district. And John, can you tell us how that helps us comply with FEMA regs?
Yeah, it brings you into consistency with FEMA regs. We took the FEMA floodplain boundary, and that will actually be an overlay. And on the final zoning map, we'll have a map that has overlay districts. So we'll have a map that has the bluff overlay. We'll have a map on the map will be the FEMA. And then we do have proposing a small overlay for the downtown. for a couple of extra design guidelines. But we took the FEMA report and the FEMA boundary, and we're gonna overlay it, and we've incorporated it into the zoning code. So there's consistency between the FEMA program and the zoning ordinance.
Are there any particular implications of having these overlay districts?
It's, the overlay district will manage where the house can be built, the structures can be built relative if it's in the floodplain or the floodway. Basically, we're really concerned about people recognizing if they have a piece of property that's in the FEMA floodplain, that they have to realize that, or at least understand that if part of it is in the floodway, then there's no way that they're gonna build it. But if it's in the floodplain, then people should be talking to their architect and contractor about potential building techniques in order to prevent in case of a flood. So it's just a different level of public notice.
And
Well,
there's
it'll force
insurance
them-
implications.
It'll force awareness and a
Yes.
discussion. Okay, good.
Yeah, and they make you do it.
And then we are adding something called a shoreline protection strip, which was recommended by the Tip and Mid Watershed Council as a best practice to protect the lake from damaging uses on shore. You can check that out in your copy. Oh, and here's a good one. This is sounds really dry, but it could be very helpful for some reasons. The next one is non-conforming uses. And John, can you tell us about that?
Sure, the state statute that was adopted in 2006 by the state came up with the ability that communities can have a little bit more flexibility with non-conforming uses. I'll give you an example. We've got the flower shop on the next block that's been there for a long time. Under the current code, they can't do anything to the building, nothing. If the owner of the building, let's say, wanted to add on a small addition onto the back of the building under the new code, as long as they're not infringing on any of the dimensional requirements, they would be able to enlarge the nonconformity. That's under the state statute. So it gives people that have non-conforming properties the opportunity to maintain them and enlarge them as long as they don't impact the dimensional requirements. So it helps out, this really helps out in older communities that, you know, used to have markets or businesses like a flower shop or a barber shop in a neighborhood that under the current context of zoning, they're non-conforming and they can't do anything with the property. And typically what happens in many communities, they deteriorate, decline, and become a blight. So the new code allows people to maintain them as long as they don't increase the level or degree of nonconformity. So we've included that into the code as well.
Hopefully this could help the ZBA.
Absolutely. We have a lot of non-conforming.
We're gonna put the ZBA out of business.
That's okay. That's okay.
Bill,
Yes.
I have a question about the previous one, Article 4 there. That shoreline protection strip would be the Weequay properties here east of Zoll Street. And the uses, we've had a case in front of us just recently with proposed structure added there. Would this affect?
Yes, within the shoreline strip, yes.
Okay,
Yeah. The shoreline strip is supposed to be reserved for natural vegetation. And it's supposed to be an area that can withstand the ebbs and flows of the increasing lake levels without impacting structures, with the exception of docks, or if they have a structure like that goes out into the lake, as long as it's been licensed or not licensed, permitted by Eagle or the Army Corps of Engineers. Those are the only exceptions.
but bulkheading, hardening the shore,
As long as it's
riprap.
approved, as long as it's approved by either the state or the federal government. But the other part of the shoreline strip is to provide a best practice so people aren't using herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers adjacent to the waterfront, which contribute to pollution and, you know, other unintended consequences.
Okay, I'm catching up. What is it you can't do under this Article 4 that you could do
Right.
before this?
The shoreline preservation strip is you can construct a new residence, but it required, the strip is based on the 1985 ordinary high water mark. And in the code, I think we used, the state uses 60 feet. I think we reduced it to the same as the rear yard setback, which is 30 or 35.
35.
Yeah. And the idea is that no one could put a structure into that area with the exception of anything that is permitted by the Eagle or the Corps, which, which according to Jeff, in some of those areas like around Weequahic, is that somebody may want to put a dock to get access to their boat, or they want to put like a walkway out with a small patio, but those all have to be licensed by the appropriate authorities. And that's not going to be prohibited, but it just has to be managed. But the real benefit of the shoreline protection strip is a lot like the floodplain overlay. It's mainly public awareness.
Okay,
I guess Sue's question, I would want to understand a little bit too here is that what could they do now that they won't be able to do when this Article 4 gets? And maybe
The only allowed structures in the strip are walkways and stairs, 6 feet or less in width to the water's edge with permeable materials, and shoreline retaining structures permitted by an appropriate agency, either Eagle or the U.S. Corps. So that's it. They can't put an accessory building. They can't build anything that's permanent within the shoreline strip, with the exception of that, the walkways or any type of bulkheading that's permitted by the state agency.
It isn't,
But
they
can they
can't do
now?
that now because of Eagle or something,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah.
So we're just kind of putting it in our code to bring it to people's attention. I mean, because we're not really changing what they can do because we defer to those folks that are more restrictive than we are.
Yeah, the prohibited activities are storage or use of pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, the storage of burning of compost, grass clippings, leaf litter, septic tanks or septic drainage fields, or the placement of earth such as rock, sand, and soil unless permitted. So it's really identifying prohibited activities that you can't put into that area.
okay. It sounds like it might affect people doing, beach refreshment where they want to bring in a bunch of sand and dump it. But otherwise, anything that you listed there, we won't let them do anyway,
Yeah.
so probably doesn't make a lot of difference, but educational value is the point.
Well, I think too, we have Glen Drive, right, though,
We do.
that
Yes.
also enters in with
Yeah.
some of those.
Yeah,
That's the other
absolutely.
area that. it
Mhm,
affects.
where they're more likely to get up to their own.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Sue, if you could check out the wording on this when you get your copy, that would be really helpful with your particular expertise.
Mhm.
All right, permitted yard encroachments, this is where we say that you can have up to 7 feet of a non-enclosed front porch extend beyond the front setback line. And then the last one on page 3 is gonna be interesting. We definitely would like your input on hunting chickens. This is actually a thought that had to do with the AR district and the fact that we eliminated that. And Jeff says he's had a number of residents inquire over the years about the ability to keep chickens, especially when egg prices went up and people were, more concerned about their food and quality and health and all that. So we're actually proposing being able to keep 6 chickens, but no roosters in a fenced area.
To clarify, our current zoning code does not allow
was
you to
gonna say,
keep
right.
any chickens at all. right?
So this would
This is a
be
change.
in
This
the
is a change.
residential district?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a change.
It is a change.
So. I want chickens bad, I'm not gonna lie, but now at what point does this start or stop? Like, what about beekeeping and what about some other,
It's not listed in the ordinance.
so we're stopping with chickens?
And Bill's right, where it came up is I threw it in and suggested we take a look at it because in the other communities that we work with, it kind of started with COVID, but about a year or two ago when we had the chicken flu nationally,
Yeah.
chicken prices and egg prices went up because of that. People started just raising chickens and communities were going, you know, in a way, the zoning administrators were going, you can't do it. In another way, people were saying, but we want access to fresh eggs and we're not gonna buy them because of what's going on with the avian flu. So, I mean, it's something that's happening.
Well, Vanessa, I think, brings up a good point, because on one hand, beehives.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, you could have a bunch of people working on beehives, but is that something we want to promote because of
Pollination and.
So when you start getting into weeds of all these different potential uses, it just.
I
made me
just
think
wonder,
about-
why
no,
chickens? Why not
I think
beehives?
chickens, because that's the most important.
Why not
thing, yeah.
turkey? Why not?
Chickens is something that we've got questions about, but they're currently not allowed. So it's not even the agriculture AR district. So that's something interesting.
What about, Bill, if somebody wanted to build, I'm assuming somebody's gonna wanna build a building to house the chickens, you're not gonna.
Chicken
Coop, yes.
I was just going there.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything restricting that?
It would be an accessory building.
And you're gonna long-term rent it to the chicken.
Yeah, you can only have so many accessory structures. That's, you know, something above ground. So if you wanted to spend your allowance on your, you know, one of your accessory structures, you could do that, I guess.
What about a chicken? Oh, I shouldn't even go there.
Well, we do have a city code ordinance that says no one shall keep any pet, fowl, or whatever that's a
Right.
nuisance. So, in a way, the city code implies that those animals are allowed so long as those animals are not a nuisance. Even though our zoning code says specifically, current
No
zoning code,
livestock.
no livestock at all. So we do have a little conflict there, but I think where the worry is in general for most residents will be, all right, at what point will these animals become a nuisance, for me or my neighbors? And, the city code kind of defines what a nuisance is and it's in there. So maybe when we go through an in-depth review, we should kind of compare what the nuisance regulations are compared to what this is. But I think that's one way of regulating animal husbandry, if you want to call it that, getting out of control.
And most
There's chicken
people
coop.
just, they're free range. I mean, we're gonna have chickens.
I can tell you from towns that I worked in Vermont, there was, we've always, because they allow chickens everywhere. So one of the issues we got into often was, there was no fence on a property, so some chickens were always going on their neighbor's property. So should we have a requirement that the chickens must be enclosed?
It says fence.
We
So
said yes.
there must be fence. Okay, so just those things to keep in mind that.
Well, you said no roosters, so that
No roosters, no roosters is one of the big.
the noisy part of it.
So.
But also, just to clarify, chickens are one of those animals that can also attract more vermin, skunks, stuff like that.
Oh, coyotes.
Coyotes, so it's just another thing to keep in mind that
Awesome.
in denser residential areas, you know, we've always gotten complaints about skunks and coyotes previously, so there's a potential that it could attract that, so just something to keep in mind.
So we want to see how the community feels about this. It's an idea and it's a lot of cities are considering it now. So there it is.
Is it something that, you feel like you want input, like you want it to be on there? I'm kind of not for it, or if people
Yeah.
want to have it, it should be where the agricultural was. And I know Victor mentioned that Jeff said some residents, what is some residents? I mean, if it's 5 people, you know, if it hasn't been on there, and I don't know if that's a reason to all of a sudden decide to stick it as something to think about, because only 5 people of our 1,200 or how, I don't know how many it was, but yeah, if you want to bring it up, but I don't know. Not listening to it.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned it.
Bill, let's put it out there. Let's see what kind of a response we get.
The other possibility, I think, Bill and John, is to consider whether or not it would be one of those special land uses to allow chickens, as opposed to making it by right, if that's a concern. But I don't know.
Because then if it was a special use, the neighbors would be notified. If they had applied for the permit, the neighbors could come in and say, over my dead body, or this is a great idea, and you'd get some sense of whether it was gonna be a problem or not a problem.
I forget what special land use, is that where you have to follow the guidelines? And then,
You have to
so
come in
does,
and-
does the audience really have, they have say, but then if it passes all the 7 things, then the residents really don't matter that live nearby that might not want it. just something else to.
Does anybody have any initial thoughts on, does this make sense, or is this just too much, too fast at this point?
How much fun do you want to have in the public hearings, Bill?
That's the other thing, you know, will people seize on this to say, you know, these guys have gone too far, and
You can just-
It's modern. It's looking to the future instead of today. Is what it is.
Just for, we see a show of hands of those who are pro-chicken. Anti-chicken?
Pro chicken.
Pro chicken? I think we
Who's
should put it out
pro-chicken
there and
then?
see how people feel.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Who is anti-chicken?
I'm not anti,
I'm not anti, I'm just
It's a
sort
bit
of,
different.
I'm indifferent to it. I just think that there are other animals that are less, that will bring less of an issue up, like bees and things. If you want to test the waters, there might be
Is there
some
anything
other.
now that would preclude somebody from keeping one of those?
I don't think we can keep bees.
So our zoning code, the way it's written is unless it's expressly allowed, it's in
Yeah.
the zoning code, it's not allowed. However, I don't think bees were kept in mind when we wrote the nuisance, city code nuisance ordinance or the zoning code, so. That's an issue. I don't think Jeff has gone out ever to investigate someone keeping bees. And I don't really think he's, I don't think he's really enforced either the chicken, I mean, I don't think he's really gone out, there are people who have chickens, you know, and I don't think he's actually enforcing.
Do we have chickens? Do people know people that have chickens?
There are a couple.
Yeah.
So they're here.
Let me just give you some insight. In communities that in communities that have chickens, as long as you don't have a rooster, people feel that the next door neighbor dog is more of a nuisance than the chickens are.
Chickens don't bark.
Yeah.
Chickens don't bark as long as there's no rooster, and if,
As long as they're contained.
as long as they're contained, people don't even know they're there. So. when
And
people think
truly,
of chickens
somebody
right
that
away, they
has
think of
three
a
dogs
rooster.
next door, in all honesty, probably makes more noise than a few chickens in the backyard are going to. If that's a nuisance, I mean, I think we need to look at that part if we're not going to let people do it.
I would just say my only concern with chickens, and I'm kind of indifferent, but it's really about the negative potential of attracting.
Yeah.
In more dense areas, skunks and.
Coyotes.
Yeah, that's something to keep, but I do think it's something that's been, I would say it's allowed, I know John probably knows this too, it's probably allowed in it's being more allowed in more communities. Doesn't mean it's something that we have to do, it's just, it is a trend.
Here's where I come down. I lean pro chicken. And, but I think the chicken thing could trip up a much bigger, much more important set of approvals that we need from the community. So my thought would be, why don't we keep this on hand as an addition in the future and see if it makes sense to the community. John?
I'd leave it in personally, and if there's, when this is rolled out and then there's public hearings, let people react to it.
Maybe can we
I mean, I
almost
really,
take
I
it
like
out
the
then?
story behind it and the trends. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Right. And we're saying, don't count your chickens. So, yes.
It's kind of like leaving a typo in the document when you know somebody is gonna edit who needs to find a mistake. You leave the chickens in, they get all focused on the chickens and everything else pales by comparison.
Wow,
They'll be
You're teaching, thank you.
right to the chickens.
Very Machiavellian.
Kim had a question.
Kim's got-
So is composting allowed in the city?
Should be.
Yeah,
Because that would attract also,
It does.
and people compost.
And little
So-
dogs attract coyotes too.
Yeah, so
Sorry, guys.
really,
Compost for like home gardening,
yeah.
yeah, it does.
But it does,
But it
I can
attracts-
attest to the fact that it attracts, I think it was.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
We used to
Does.
compost
Oh,
for
yeah.
the flower shop.
Wasn't worth it.
A number of years ago, we used to compost big time for the flower shop. Jamie still composts, but they haul it away twice a week, but We had a huge compost pile, and yes, it does attract
Yep.
Yes, it
critters.
does.
It does.
All right, I'm hearing we should leave chickens in at this point and see what, see how they can do. Thank you. Thank you for all that.
A lot of time spent on chickens.
You know,
Yes.
I had one more question.
Yes.
I
Wasn't
saw that you
anticipating.
addressed some height things in the central business district. Did you address height in residential at all, or are you just leaving
We
it
kept that alone
as
at
is?
35 feet.
Yeah, 35.
Primary 35.
And 2 stories?
Did
the
we take
shed
the
view?
stories out? Did we take this, I don't remember,
2 and 35.
because we had discussions about stories and.
One of the issues down,
35.
John has an answer for us.
yeah, one of the issues downtown at the cottage company's 2 buildings are the enormous penthouses and elevator shaft houses on that way exceed, you know.
And we addressed
Yeah,
that, and we addressed
We've addressed that, Bob.
You
the
what?
elevator.
We have addressed that.
They've made changes to this code.
We
to
made
address-
changes in the
Okay,
code for that.
yeah. When you look at those 2 buildings from street level, they're fine. Then you go, oh,
So John, it was 35 feet. Did we have stories in
No.
there? No. I think we took
Can't
the
fit too
stories.
much in there with
out. Yeah, I
35
think we
feet
took the
anyway.
stories.
Okay,
Sort of allow for short stories. Short stories.
we feel like we've simplified some parking requirements. And you can see those there. But for
Okay,
a
I'm gonna
single
ask another
dwelling,
question with parking
1
then.
space per user.
Did we
On that.
address anything with what can be parked there, such as boats, motorhomes, is that staying?
That's in the general provisions of the code relative. There's provisions in there regarding trailers and RVs in another section of the ordinance.
Okay.
And are those remaining the same?
Yes.
Okay.
And when we say parking requirements, what deems parking? Pavement?
Pavement,
An impervious.
Can it be pervious pavement?
yes.
What did we say? Aggregate, we
He
had.
said, it can't be a loose aggregate material.
Can't be.
But it can be a compacted ag?
It can be a compacted, and it can be, pavers, and it can be concrete and asphalt.
Can it be grass pavers?
It can be grass pavers.
That can't be grass.
Pardon me?
Can't be just grass.
Can't be just grass.
Yeah, no stones.
No dimension, no.
That answered your question.
Structure, no. It's not like.
On the grass pavers over here.
Grass now, they can go through it. It's like onion.
Okay, so the next 2, accessory dwelling units and accessory commercial units, are also in the top 5 of the most important changes in this. And we talked about the accessory dwelling units. And we set the size, we set where they can be. And there are a number of other requirements for them that you'll see in your copy in terms of their appearance, looking similar to the primary structure in the same quality and that type of thing. So check that out. And then here's the next major one that you'll see, and that's a concept called an accessory commercial unit. And this is the ability for a property owner to operate a small business, and it could be attached to her home, or it could be in a standalone building. And the same regs apply. You still only get 2 accessory buildings, no matter how you use them. And one of those could be this thing we're calling an accessory commercial unit. The idea here is that these would be really micro businesses. It's kind of between a home occupation, if you're just doing something near your home, and a paid retail storefront. And it's a way to start a new business or to operate a desirable, low impact business right in a neighborhood. And this may concern people on the first hearing, because it's not the way that zoning in the United States has gone over the last 100 years. It's gone the other way. Although Harbor Springs has a long history of having businesses right in our neighborhoods. And we've launched kind of a community project to put out the word to some long timers to ask if they could identify businesses that they recall being in the neighborhoods, so that we can get a list of those things and show that, this isn't a new concept. In fact, it's an old concept and we just got a new name and a new way to potentially allow it. Last meeting, Emily asked if this is a good idea and is it in the sources that we've been reading and what's the basis for it? And so John came up with some really good articles. I did some editing on those and put them into kind of a primer for us. So there's 3 articles about the value of walkable, movable businesses for us to study up on.
And Bill, I think another, and I'm sure you can say this, is that it has to be owner operated. The person who runs that business has to live on that piece of property.
You can't lease it out to have
Yeah,
somebody
it's
else.
not like somebody else. It's the owner of the property has to be running that, be on scene for that business.
And it's small, 800 square foot max. And the hours are limited, the signage is limited, parking is limited. We took off from a number of communities' regulations on this, and we think we got the right blend of restrictions and permissions to make this thing useful. We identified the types of businesses that could do this, and they're low impact and high value, we think, to residents that are nearby.
This table is a summary of the items that are being either changed or proposed.
The bigger.
In the actual code, is it clear to the reader that the limitation is 2 buildings with a total of 75%?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So our homework assignments are to read these articles and see what you think about that. And then to read the proposed code and see if if the committee captured the spirit of, what we took away from those articles.
The administrative review committee is composed of,
Pardon me?
who's on the committee?
Oh,
The
moving to
administrative-
the-
Administrative Review Committee?
Yeah.
Is, you don't have that chapter, but I'll read it to you. Administrative Review Committee includes the zoning administrator, the chairman of the planning commission, and consist of the zoning administrator, planning commission chair, planning commission member, and planning consultant, and shall perform the duties of the planning commission prescribed. So it's a small core group that will review the plans. The way that it's set up, the committee hasn't gone through Article 8. There's a trigger in there that it's really for small reviews. Anything that hits the trigger has to go to the planning commission.
Good.
And someone can always ask for a full planning commission.
Yeah, the applicant can always ask.
And do all 4 members of that committee need to approve it, or does it need to be a majority?
They all have to.
Okay.
So this would be a place where reviews would be done that otherwise would go to a planning commission meeting and you'd have to wait for the planning commission to meet?
Yes.
Okay,
I'll give you a great example was in the current code, when somebody comes in, they want to build a guest house.
Mhm.
They've got to go through special land use approval, which is a public hearing. They got to go before the planning commission. And the way the new code is set up, if somebody wanted to, with ADUs, there is no more guest house. So somebody can come in, file for a zoning permit for an accessory dwelling unit. It immediately goes to the review committee, and if they approve it, then they get their permit and they move on.
Does this affect Jeff's workload?
Actually, I think what it would do is it would reduce Jeff's workload and it would reduce the planning consultant because all these reviews have to have a review memorandum and public hearing notice and
Got it.
all that
Sounds
stuff that goes with it. So it'd be way more efficient.
We're paying John's firm to do that work.
Yeah,
I'm sure, yeah.
I'm kind of writing myself out of work for you guys.
I don't think you're really short on work.
Yeah, so the idea is to move things along faster for residents, still provide a level of oversight that makes sense. And that's what the planning commission charge does. One of the main things you charge the committee with doing is looking for ways to streamline operations. All right, next topic is flag lots. We talked about that a month or two ago here. And the planning commission asked us to go ahead and investigate whether we thought flag lots would be a good idea to allow in residential areas and, you know, how that could be described and how that could be managed. And we provided some wording for that. We're in agreement. And we think it's a good idea and could allow some more additional modest homes to be built without impact to the community character, and could be very valuable to the homeowner and to the community.
We also said B1 with no commercial on the back lot,
Correct.
on the flag lot.
On the flag lot, yeah.
And then the final item is scintillating definitions. And there's 20 or 30 pages of definitions, yeah. And John has gone through and proposed modernized definitions and streamlined definitions, especially regarding alcohol-related businesses. You did the research and synced up with the Liquor Control Commission and state definitions so that we're in sync with those completely.
I have a question. Is it possible, John, that you could pull out any changes to the zoning ordinance that involve trees, so we can at the February tree board meeting go over, because then the tree board has a tree plan with some goals that they would like to see in the zoning code, so likely get their input on anything that might involve trees. I can bring that back to the planning commission after that should go, because they do have some goals in there about that. I'd like them to discuss it.
Good idea. All right, let me go over the notes real quickly, just for officialdom. We said short-term rentals regulations are not part of the zoning code today, and we're not recommending that they be part of the zoning code going forward. Those would stay in the city code. And our brilliant work to condense the number of zoning districts is going to cause the definitions for the short-term rental regulations to have to be refigured and all that, because it's based on today's zoning districts. So together we'll have to figure that out with council. But there's no intent to change the flavor of those regulations at all with this. Signage regulations will be taken from the zoning code and placed in the standalone city ordinance, and we're not recommending any changes to that. And then just to confirm, with our expansion of the CBD zoning district boundaries, slight expansion that has no effect on the DDA, Downtown Development Authority, which is regulated and governed and established under a whole set of different regs.
I have a question.
Yes.
For the CBD, was there a particular reason why on the north side of East Third Street, it was not decided to expand the CBD toward Judd Street, like on the south side of East Third Street? I'm not saying it should, I'm just wondering if there's a particular reason. Because there's no business there currently, or because it was not part of the B district?
It wasn't part of the P district. It's the part of the still R2.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There you have it. The next level of detail on the committee recommendations. And as a prize for coming to tonight's meeting, you're going to walk away with an 80 or 100-page document.
Yeah.
Just the
Just the beginning.
And the last one you had a chance of.
Sure.
Oh, you mean a date or friend, I hope.
All right, let's talk about.
Let's fill it free.
All right.
Don't tell the tree board. Oh. No such love.
Thanks, I think.
Gee, now is it possible to get a thoughts?
Yeah. Hey, John, can you also,
That's right.
maybe email that out to Bill, so Bill can email out?
Thank you.
Some article wants to,
Yeah.
This is a member.
Okay, we're not quite done yet. We need to talk about next steps and timeline.
Bill, let me just give a real quick overview of this. The packet that you're receiving has articles 1 through 7, 14, and 15. Those are the articles that the review committee or the zoning committee have gone through a couple of times. The balance of the ordinance, just so you know, Article 8, which is not there, is what we're referring to as the site plan review section, which is pretty dry. It's just the process, the procedure, what's required with a site plan, documents, and then what the standards of review are. Article number 9 is special land use approval process, heavily weighted on the state statute. Again, procedural. Article 10 is land development options, and this will include the section on plan unit development, which you already have, but we refined it. It's going to include the condominium development, which is in the current code, the mobile home development, which is in the current code, the condo hotel development, which is in the current code, and flag lots. So that's land development options. If you'll note, on Article 6, we have site development standards, which regulate what goes on the property, landscaping, lighting, parking. And then we have land development options, which talk about how the land can be developed. Article 11 is the zoning board of appeals article, which is heavily weighted on state statute. Article 12 is administrative and enforcement, which is Jeff's job and his responsibilities as zoning administrator. Article 13 is amendment and severability, which is the legal verbiage at the end of the ordinance that talks about if a provision is challenged and how that's going to be handled. So the articles that you don't have yet are the ones that are really embedded in the state statute, and they're very procedural. But the committee wanted to hold those off until last because the most important articles are the ones that Bill just discussed. Article 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are really the main components of the zoning code. So that's why you don't have them yet. So I just wanted to explain that.
We gave you the. And, so now's our chance over the next, few weeks to really scrub this and look for errors, look for changes of ideas.
And the timeline going forward.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow we need your input.
You'll get quality commensurate with the time we have.
It's gonna start tonight. We're here.
So here we are, January 18th, and Victor and John and the team did some thinking about what a schedule could possibly be. And we think that if you are willing to have you planning commission members are willing to have a special meeting on February 8th, we were asking you to kind of hold that thought. We would go ahead with that. And we would have the next level of discussion, kind of expanding on what we do tonight. You'll have now been able to read the actual wording, and you can bring back ideas and corrections and improvements. We would also have a public hearing at that, because there's really no downside in doing that. You know, if some residents want to come up and give us some input, that would be great. And Victor and team will advertise that to be legal. And then our next regular meeting is the week later, and that's February 15th. And we would also have a public hearing. No reason not to. We'll get some more input, and then we can continue to have our final discussion and perhaps lock in on a recommendation to approve or to modify. And then were we to do that, John would have a lot of work to do, and Jim Raymer